Hello, good to have you with us. Let's start with a question. Should we be building more roads or using our cars less? The two camps are becoming increasingly divided. So which side are you on? And are road wars affecting our local elections? With 2 weeks to go, the campaign is in full swing. And we've got the Conservative MP for North Norfolk, Duncan Baker, and also the co-leader of the Green Party, Adrian Ramsey. I'm sure you've got lots to say about road building. Welcome to you both. So I'm sure many of you have seen the pictures of environmentalists demonstrating in the capital this weekend. Yesterday was Earth Day. The protesters have been taking part and have all sorts of concerns, but among them the government's road building programme. We often talk about the need for new and better roads to improve the economy and to simply allow us to get about more easily. But campaigners say we're at a tipping point, and if many more are built, we'll be unable to meet our net zero targets. In Norfolk, a series of road schemes around Norwich are being delayed by a pending court case due to be heard next month, which could force the government to rethink its road building policy. Andrew can tell us more.
Alongside parts of the busy A47, they've already marked out where the new carriageways will go. But at the moment, all the work is on hold because of this man.
If this case wins, then every other road scheme, they'll have to change the way they do the methodology to include other road schemes and also land-based development.
Andrew Boswell is a long-standing environmental campaigner and a former Green Party councillor. His argument, which a judge feels is strong enough to be heard in court, concerns the way in which ministers assessed the environmental impact of the three A47 schemes around Norwich, which are all close together.
All the schemes are just assessed for the carbon impact by themselves in isolation, and they weren't assessed together. So there's a big impact on the carbon emissions in the Norwich area, and it's not being accounted for.
So your argument is that because these schemes are so close together, you feel that we should be looking at the cumulative impact?
We should be looking at the cumulative impacts on these schemes. They're all happening in the same place at the same time.
And not just on the A47. Nearby there are also plans for a 4-mile Western Link road through woodlands. Dr Boswell says if this also gets the go-ahead, it will add even more to carbon levels around Norwich. On Friday, opponents of the Western Link were at the Department of Transport to hand in a painting of the area where the new route will run. Dr Boswell was there too. This was part of a wider demonstration against road building. Environmental groups worry that if any more roads are built, it'll be impossible for us to reach our net zero targets.
The government is not going to meet its own targets. It can't on the one hand say, oh, we want to lead the way, we want to reduce emissions, and then have a national road policy which is over £60 million. It's absolute nonsense.
There is also the threat of legal action over plans to develop the A428 between Bedford and Cambridge, which has put work there on hold as well. Campaign groups are considering an appeal after a first attempt was thrown out. Back here in Norfolk, the Conservatives believe that improving roads like the A47 can be good for the environment because it makes it easier to get about and it eases the pressure on villages which are used for rat runs. Labour and the Liberal Democrats broadly agree, but they think the Conservatives have messed up the plans for the A47 and they have serious concerns about the viability and the growing cost of the Western Link. There are a lot of people, not least the region's business community, who wants this and other roads improved as soon as possible. But there is another body of opinion which says it's time for a rethink.
Well, the Highways Agency told us the support we have received locally for these schemes has been overwhelming, but we recognise the right of individuals to challenge the government on aspects of their work. We have set ourselves tough targets in terms of lowering corporate carbon emissions and making sure that our future road projects lead to an increase in local biodiversity. So, Duncan Baker, do you want to see these roads being built?
Yeah, fundamentally, overall, yes. And I think if you take the Norwich Western Link, I mean, in my constituency of North Norfolk, we have the slowest ambulance response times in the country. You know, there are people who are category C1 and category C2, heart attacks and strokes. the hospital leaders, not just the business community, but the hospital leaders saying it'll take 20 minutes off the journey time to be able to save someone's life by reaching rural areas of North Norfolk because it's 35 miles
Let me
to
put
get
that
out
point
there.
to Adrian Ramsey,
That's
a
important.
practical point.
Very important.
Well, I'm deeply concerned about the pressures on the NHS, but we need to tackle that directly through the funding that it needs to be put into the NHS and indeed into the social care system, which is at the root cause of this. I don't think it justifies putting huge amounts of money, in the case of the Western Link, £250 million of money. I don't see how the county council can justify that.
You can't reach unless you build a road to them. It's not about funding the NHS more in this particular case. It is about being able to create connectivity into rural areas and save people's lives.
What about this legal challenge? Because it could have big implications. Are you frustrated that it's holding things up then?
Actually, I'm not. I think it's actually quite a sensible legal case, and that's why, of course, the judge has agreed to look at it. And we saw the same thing when they were talking about the cumulative impacts of building cable corridors across my constituency in North Norfolk. And again, we would probably agree on this matter that you should look at the environmental impacts, and that's what this court case will do. So whether it does overall change the course of what the government is trying to do, we don't know yet. But I can see why they're looking at it in culmination.
Are all roads bad, Adrian Ramsey?
It's about the overall plan that the government has to spend £27 billion across the country on new road building, which the evidence this week has made clear would completely bust the government's own climate change targets. We're living at a time of a climate emergency. We have a region where people tell me all the time they're saying the bus services have been scrapped from their village, or the bus service is far too expensive for them to use. We need to have far more investment in our region in public transport that everyone can benefit from, and certainly large-scale road building programmes like the ones proposed here are putting the money in the wrong direction and busting the government's own environmental aims.
Let me put an email to you. We've had several emails on this. Sue Broughton says, more roads only bring more traffic, and backs up Adrian Ramsey's point just made there. Actually, we need better public transport instead.
Yeah, well, of course, that's a good point. Norfolk's actually got quite a good record in terms of its public transport. It's seen government money flow into the region to try and help fund it. I mean, the £2 bus fare that was capped recently, I mean, in my constituency, has been absolutely praised. It's been really important. But look, we've got to look at things. We've got to recognise that it is about also infrastructure. I don't want the East to be left out, and there's often a case that we do moan quite a lot that we don't get our fair share. We do need connectivity, and we've got to remember, Amelia, that the cars of the future will be running on EVs, it'll be electric vehicles, lorries will be hydrogen powered. Yes, I do recognise that road building has its downsides, but actually in the future we should be moving towards this net zero and actually looking at what we do.
But very briefly, Adrian Ramsey?
Well, Duncan, you talk about people using bus services, and we all want to see bus prices come down more than the government's done. But what about all the villages around our region that have lost their bus services entirely? That's just not acceptable when we need to be improving public transport.
We're going to be talking more about buses and public transport in a moment.